Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and yesterday I did a video about training volume and fat loss and how to balance out things like minimum effective volume and all of that when you are trying to lose weight versus being willing to gain weight. And I had quite a bit of discussion about how food itself is anabolic and it impacts a lot of different things in the body. And a subscriber made the point, which I'll flip in here for you guys, and it's about the YouTuber Boogie, who you guys, most of you know who he is. He's been around a real long time. All of us have seen him at least at some point, I would assume. But the point he made is that before his weight loss surgery, his doctor gave estimates on things. And yeah, he appeared to have over 200 pounds of lean body mass. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Because this is an interesting point. And the reason I'm going to go here with this is twofold in nature, because I'm going to talk about two things that people need to know, particularly for novice lifters. That again, important factors to think about whether you're really fat and you need to lose weight while you're lifting early on through your new gains, or if you're an underweight guy who wants to get bigger. People need to understand that food is extremely anabolic. And just like studies we have on anabolics themselves, what happens when we give people anabolics and they stop lifting? They gain muscle. In fact, we have studies, multiple studies now done, where people who have at least a year of lifting experience are given anabolic drugs and told to quit lifting. They gain more muscle than the guys who continue to lift, just sitting around on the couch, right? We've got multiple studies showing this now. Food can be the same way. And largely, a lot of it comes through similar pathways in the body. A lot of it has to do with things like intermuscular IGF-1. That's one of the pathways, which is how testosterone causes muscles to grow. So what people need to think about is the fact that food itself is so anabolic that there are people out there that just because of their obesity have more muscle mass than some of the biggest natural bodybuilders do when they are cut down to their leanest. And here's going to be the important thing that we need to think about, is that when you factor that in and you realize how anabolic food itself has the potential to be, we understand why caloric surplus is so valuable for gaining muscle mass. And it highlights another point, something that we need to think about the other direction. And this is why you've got to find balance with these things, is that if you gain way too much fat, what do we also know? How many of these fat people, if they get down to a normal weight, still carry all their muscle? Not many of them. Because fat loss, particularly very large amounts of fat loss, tend to strip muscle off of you. In other words, the point here is that it's very difficult to separate these two things. It's usually only through very short periods of time, and otherwise only during maybe ideal periods of programming where everything is completely optimized, where you can actually separate fat loss with muscle loss and fat gain with muscle gain. In other words, it is extremely difficult to lose body fat, significant amounts of body fat, or get really lean and keep all of your muscle. In some cases, the goals that people set, it's actually impossible to do it without drugs involved, depending upon how lean a person's trying to get. And conversely, it is very, very difficult to gain muscle mass without gaining body fat at an appreciable rate. So this is kind of what people need to think about. In other words, someone who is really, really fat, if they don't want to lose muscle, they really need to get under a barbell and train. Because in other words, the best thing they could do is obviously keep the muscle they have to keep their metabolism up and train and everything else. And I think this is an important thing to think about. When someone's morbidly obese, the resistance training is going to be important for them if they want to keep their metabolism up after they lose weight. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing cardio, because someone who needs to lose 100 pounds of body weight needs a total intervention. They need a total lifestyle intervention at that point. But that needs to include getting progressively stronger on big exercises, because someone who's morbidly obese has the potential to have a fair amount of muscle already. They probably already do have a lot of muscle. If they can keep that muscle and in some cases gain a little more during their weight loss process, their metabolism and their fitness level is going to be much, much higher than if they just jump on a treadmill and do cardio for hours a day and lose that 100 pounds. They're going to be a lot better off in the long term. And I mean, so much so that I've seen people on my novice program, for example, who lost weight the entire time. At least one of the early people who ran it, I tracked what he did for around 6 months, and I remember watching what he did. He destroyed my novice numbers, but he started at like 300 pounds, right? He started at 300 pounds, and he dieted down over the course of around 9 months or so. He went from 300 pounds down to 240. Now, he was still overweight at 240. He didn't get lean. He wasn't like a lean 240. You know, it's not like he was 12% body fat here. He was still well above 20% body fat after that fat loss. But what happened? Because he started at 300 pounds, he had a lot of muscle. And what ended up happening over the course of the program, I remember tracking his numbers and watching his log. It was interesting for me because, again, I just put it out. And so I followed his log because I think he had it, might have been on bodybuilding.com. Followed his log, and he destroyed most people's novice numbers in that program. I think at the 9-month mark, the guy was squatting like almost 400 pounds for 5 reps. All right, he was benching like 250 or 245 for 5, and he was deadlifting over 400 for 5 reps. 60 pounds lighter than where he started. But he also, his strength shot up very quickly. He was one of those guys that he started a little, not very strong at first, but because he already had the muscle mass there, he just had to learn to use it. His numbers skyrocketed really fast. I mean, I want to say the guy was benching 200 pounds within 6 weeks. For being untrained, like going from like a 120 pound bench to a 200 pound bench in like 6 weeks, just shot up. But the thing is, he destroyed those numbers while losing fat, because he had so much fat to lose that getting under a barbell, he was able to keep his metabolism up and gain muscle mass, presumably some muscle mass. Might not have. Maybe he just learned to use the muscle that he had with the time under the bar. But he didn't lose any muscle because he got a lot stronger. So that's kind of a take-home, is that obese people need to realize they're carrying a lot of muscle from being fat. You can use that to your advantage in the long term to help keep your metabolic rate up. Do some resistance training. You know, they obviously need a diet intervention. They obviously need to be doing cardio, but they need to be resistance training too. Now we come back over to the skinny teenager who is scared of losing his abs, but he wants to gain muscle. The point there is that they need to understand that if you really and truly are serious about making impressive muscle gains in your first year, you're going to have to eat. Food is extremely anabolic. And yes, that might in some cases mean gaining some body fat. But if you are 5'10" and 150 pounds, and you do a 25-pound bulk in your first year, even though you might gain 10 pounds of fat, you're going to gain 15 pounds of muscle. And you're going to be a lot bigger and a lot stronger, and you're probably still going to look a lot better than where you started. And the upside to that, you can always diet a few pounds of body fat off later. You know, I'm not telling them to get extremely fat. I'm not giving this as a recipe to get big and sloppy. I'm not telling you to put on 100 pounds. But I'm telling you that this will build you a base a hell of a lot faster, and that if your goal is to be at a certain point 3 years from now, you're far more likely to reach it than if you try to stay skinny because you're afraid to eat. You're just not going to make appreciable muscle gains. These guys who you see who are making just these lean gains all the time, that's drugs. That's not training. That's drugs. That's how they're achieving that. But conversely, there are also guys who have done the dirty bulk. And I don't advocate that just for health reasons. You know, if this was purely a channel about strength training or people going to compete in strongman or heavyweight powerlifting, yeah, sure, I would tell you bulk up. Never stop bulking. But that's obviously not what we're about here. This channel is about fitness, health, athleticism. So I'm not going to advocate that, but You guys know George Lehman. You guys remember what George Lehman did about 6-7 years ago? He got up really, really fat, didn't he? Got up to where he was deadlifting over 800 pounds, but he was enormously fat, like a 500 bench, 800 deadlift, as a teenager. And he bulked and bulked and bulked and ate his way to those numbers. Then he did a cut and lost about 80 or 90 pounds of fat. And then the guy was jacked. He was jacked. Now, he did lose some strength. A lot of people were like, well, man, you kept all your muscle. Like, no, I didn't. I lost muscle and strength on this cut. But it's just that because he had gotten so massively strong and big that it didn't matter if he lost 10 pounds of muscle mass. It didn't matter. He was still bigger than the overwhelming majority of guys out there who train while still being very young, even after losing 10 pounds of body fat, because he just got that big and strong due to his genetics, his training, the overeating, all these other factors that were in there. He got monstrously big. And so when he did cut, the guy was impressively big still at something like 10% body fat. So it does show that that can also be done. So people don't need to discount that. But the whole point here is that the skinny kids need to understand that you do not need to be afraid of food. If your goal is to get bigger and you're trying to gain significant amounts of muscle mass, in other words, if you want to gain 20 pounds of muscle mass from where you are right now, at any time in the next few years, you are going to have to eat. You're not going to be able to play with a bunch of intermittent fasting. You're not going to be able to do your hour of fasted cardio every morning. You're not going to keep your razor sharp abs because if you try to do that, you're not going to gain the muscle. That in the long term, it's probably going to get you to your goals much, much quicker if you just go ahead and do a reasonable bulk. I'm not telling you to gain 80 pounds. Do a reasonable bulk and then cut afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your wheels for years. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. And if you haven't checked it out, guys, go check out my Patreon site and my About tab. I do cover some topics there that I don't cover on YouTube. So I'll talk to you guys next time.